Hey, do you prefer to find the joy in life, or do you just want some help with that? If so, you're in the right place. So come on in and join the Joy Bunny clan. This is the My Slice of Life podcast. Gardening gluts. Do you love them, or do you dread them? Hello and welcome to the My Slice of Life podcast. My name is Sharon and I am your very own Highland host. Yes, I am. This season of the podcast has been given the title Let's Get Gardening, and this week we are going to have a look at what you can do when things go well. Maybe even a little too well. I'm talking gluts. All the gardening gluts. But before we get into our gluts, I would like to put the call out to all of you to give this episode a like, follow the podcast if you don't already, leave me a comment and tell someone about it to get them listening too. The idea is to create a whole load of joy bunnies all over the place. Yeah, I said joy bunnies. It came out one day, I haven't had the heart to get rid of it, so joy bunnies it is. Stick with the podcast though, as you never know what topic is going to be coming up next. I might surprise you with the next one actually. Sometimes I don't even know what the topic is going to be coming up, but I like to bring you all sorts of different things which I'm interested in and which bring some joy into my life, and I hope that they will do the same thing for you. So stick around, you just might get a nice surprise. Now that all that business is out the way though, let's start talking gluts, shall we? I wanted to cover this because I think for gardeners, there's always so much being said about plants not growing or just problems, and I've covered a little bit of that, but I think it's just as important to realise sometimes things go really well, even better than you were expecting, and before you know it, you've got a basket full of one or two types of fruit or veg and no clue what you're going to do with it all. So with all that in mind, I'm going to go through some techniques and ideas you can use with all that fruit and veg and see if I can throw in a wee recipe or two as well. And remember, all this applies to the bargain buys you can get from the supermarket too. When I got 5 punnets of apricots the other day for 10 pence each, I might add. So this will apply to all those things as well. And I'm going to start with freezing. Yeah, it's probably one of the easiest ways to deal with our bounty, isn't it? Especially with berries. It's recommended that you lay them out singly on a baking sheet. Just make sure it fits in your freezer tray. So you lay them out singly on your sheet, put them in the freezer. When they're frozen, take them off the baking sheet. You can pop them in a little freezer bag and they won't stick together. It works very well. It's great for the squishy berries, especially raspberries. But I must admit, I don't do it with like elderberries, currants, or blueberries. I just pop them straight into a bag and stick it in the freezer. That's always worked fine for me. They break up very simply, they don't stick together that much. Same with rhubarb. I just wash it, slice it up, pop it straight into a bag. That's all I have to do with that. When it comes to vegetables, it is a little different because technically you need to blanch them first. You may have guessed by that I don't always do that either. I'm such a rule breaker. It sounds fancy, but it's just plunging the prepared veg into boiling water for between 1 to 4 minutes. It does vary depending on what you have and how thick the slices or the pieces are, so it's worth getting a chart from the internet, for a bit more guidance on that. But after you boil whatever it is you have for whatever time it needs, plunge it into ice cold water and that stops any further cooking. Then you put them on the baking tray like you would do with the fruit. It's to stop the freezer burn, so I should do it more than I do, but it's usually fruit that I'm freezing, so it's not really that big an issue for me. The next way of using your gluts that I want to mention is drying. I hear a lot of people talking about these wonderful freeze dryers, but I really can't advise you on them because I don't have one. I did have a look at them, it was quite a while back, but see the ones I saw, they look pretty chunky and very expensive. I don't know if you've seen them, but these things were big. I don't have the room for that. So I've got a dehydrator, and I know some people use their oven on a low setting and then, they have the door wedged open, but it does seem like quite an expensive way of drying your fruit and veg. So I have a very basic dehydrator, a little too basic if I'm honest. I did have a slightly better one, but it started acting funny, so I got a replacement a while ago. And it's second hand, and it's okay for, I find it's alright for herbs and flowers. I do dry a lot of my herbs for storage, and I'll dry flowers like calendula or the leaves of plants, like comfrey to use in my herbal recipes. but I'm not so convinced when it comes to certain fruits. I mean, I've been trying to dry some of the apricots I told you about earlier, and I was thinking, dried apricots, they're tasty, they're not that cheap if you want to buy the ones that don't have the additives, and it looked like it was going to take about a week. I don't leave the machine running all the time. I don't like to have electrics on, if I'm overnight, I just don't like that. But they've gone mouldy, so that was a total waste of time. So if you do know of a better way, please let me know how you do it. Do you just leave your machine running? Anyway, I don't know. It only goes up to, it's 70 degrees centigrade, that's the highest it has, but I don't notice any difference in the temperature, to be honest. Even if I put it lower, it all feels the same, just cold air blowing through. I mean, even things like strawberries and raspberries seem to take forever. So if you do have a better strategy for getting them to dry out, I am all ears. I usually just freeze them because that's quicker, it's easier, and I know it works. Having said that though, fruit leathers are a great thing to make in a dehydrator. I mean, drying does have its place. You don't even need a dehydrator for a lot of things, so you can hang your herbs up. You could do that, for example. Or if you live in a place where you actually get a lot of sun, you could sun-dry your gluts. Sun-dried tomatoes are not cheap here, so I'll tell you, if you can do that in your back garden, I'm just a little bit jealous. And when you're thinking of drying, don't forget your herbs, flowers, and other useful leaves you have growing in your garden. You can dry a load of them to keep you going all the way through to the next growing season. So it is a very useful way of storing them. Speaking of which, now we come to long-term storage. Some things just store really well, if you have the space. Again, I keep hearing, say you Americans with your basements. I'm so jealous. I am so jealous what we would give to have basements. I just couldn't tell you. But potatoes store really well if you keep them dry in a nice, cool, dark place. More so the main crops, they say. But again, having said that, I had early potatoes stored last year for much longer than they say you can. There was nothing wrong with them. We were eating my early potatoes for months later than we were supposed to be. Different types of squash, they're also good for long-term storage. Things like your pumpkins, spaghetti squash, Turk's turban, I think that's a winter one, that kind of thing. There are loads of them to have over the winter months after you've enjoyed the summer ones, like your courgettes or your zucchinis. Beetroot, carrot, other root veg, they store well too if you can keep them in the right conditions. Now usually you would need a box or a container of some sort and some damp sand or compost. And then you line them up, just line up your veg, but they don't touch each other. So like if you're doing carrots, it would be head to tail. So you put one carrot down, head to tail, and then the other one, you do it the opposite way around, if you know what I mean. So it's not going to be like a row of carrots with the tops all lined up. It'll be top, tail, top, tail. That's how you'd line them up, and they don't touch. Don't let them touch, because that's how they can start rotting. And I find this method, it's good, it works, but it takes up a lot of room. So I like the veg such as parsnips that can be left in the ground pretty much until you need them. So even if you have a lot, there isn't really a mad rush to get them out of the ground and deal with them. Even if there's going to be a frost, you can throw some straw over the top just to keep the soil that little bit warmer so it doesn't freeze. You'll still be able to get them out that way. So I prefer veg that you can keep in the ground for quite a long time. Now we're going to come to one of the most obvious ways, I think, of dealing with our gluts. That's just cooking. I mean, you'll be doing this anyway, so whether it's a lovely pot of soup, and there's no limit to the kinds of soup you can make, or turning your tomatoes into sauces or passata, which you can freeze or you can can them to store them, limitless. It really is limitless what you can do here. Look for recipes as well, like ratatouille. I mean, that uses a lot of the summer veg that we often get in gluts. So if you've got your tomatoes, your garlic, your aubergine, or eggplant, I know we all call them different things, but things like ratatouille, it will use all of them. So look for those kind of recipes. They're very useful. You can get pretty creative here and start making your own too. And you can always try a small batch to experiment with and make sure you like it first. And then if you do, make a huge batch and store it for later. Again, you could freeze it. Sauces freeze brilliantly. Or if you're into canning, you can go down that road. That's not something I am really into with my sauces. I just freeze them. Fritters is another popular way to use them. Now, I found a recipe online by a lady called, let me just get the name for you, Helen Gaisley. And I like this recipe because she doesn't give exact amounts, because it depends on what you actually have. And in this recipe, she uses courgette, but it could also be done, she says, with beetroot, carrot, potato or pumpkin, things like that. So she starts with grating the main veg, whichever one you're using, and you weigh how much you have of that. Then you add around a quarter of that weight in spring onions, which are finely chopped. Then you add about the same weight of flour as you did of the onion, and around the same weight of cheese as you did of the onion. Now remember, you can change these around depending on what you have and what you like, and then add your seasoning, herbs and spices of your own choosing, again, depending on your preference. Then add 1 egg, beat it first, then add it to your mixture, and if the mixture isn't holding and seems a bit too dry, add a second egg. When it comes to cooking them, just heat a little bit of your oil in a pan till it's hot enough to sizzle, when you add the mixture in, and you're just going to drop heaped tablespoons of the mix into the pan. Cook until it's nice and firm and looking golden on the underside. She reckons it takes about 2 to 4 minutes. Turn them over. Cook for the same amount of time. Bingo. Done. Now, a good wee tip she gives, if you've grated the veg at the beginning and it feels too wet, squeeze out some of the excess moisture. And she also says it's a good idea to wash the potatoes once they're grated, because that helps to get rid of some of the starch. It will take a little bit of trial and error, but there's certainly no limit on what you can create when it comes to cooking like this. Sounds fantastic, and definitely something I am going to do more of. But if you want to try something a little sweeter, you could try baking with your gluts. I have a few websites to give you concerning gluts, but I have found one which is great if you have a certain ingredient that you want to use up. And it's called lovefoodhatewaste.com. That's all one word with no spaces, so I'll say it again, lovefoodhatewaste.com. Like I said, all one word. So just as an experiment, I typed in courgette to see what it would offer me in the way of baking, because it does give you main meal dishes as well, but I wanted cake. And it didn't let me down. The recipe it came up with was for courgette and sweet potato loaf, which comes up as vegetarian and gluten-free. So I was quite impressed with that, and I've actually, now that I've found it, plan on using that website quite a bit from now on, because I really did like the range of dishes that it offered. Like I said, you've got a lot of main meals, but it also does, cakes and sweets and things like that too. So a good range of things on that site. Other things that I've done personally in the past were things like a courgette cake, which sounds weird, but it turned out really nice. Just used the grated courgette. I did a beetroot chocolate cake, which was amazing, and I can't quite remember where I got the recipe. I think it was from one of the supermarkets that puts out a free mag, with the recipes in it. I think it was. However, again, just as a test to make sure that I'm not lying to you, if you type in just those words, beetroot chocolate cake, into your search engine, you will find there are loads of recipes that come up that you can choose from. So it's another good option for you. Because beetroot, there's a lot you can do with it, but you want a cake, you want a chocolate cake, stick your beetroot in. It was lovely. Really enjoyed it. And of course, the old ones are still good. You get carrot cake or muffins. So go have fun baking with your veg. I really need to do more of that as well, actually. I love the thought of having a slice of something, and knowing it's made from my homegrown veg, not just the usual, a bit of butter, a bit of sugar, a bit of flour and some eggs. I just really like the idea of that, and the colour. That beetroot chocolate cake, the colour was fantastic. So yeah, I'm telling you all this stuff, but I want to do more of that now. And next, actually, to go with your homemade scones, and I am saying scones, not scones, scones, and that kind of thing, is jams. Something I haven't done for a while, again, mainly because my cupboard still has a lot of jars of jam in it. It's something we don't really eat a lot of, and I can't remember the last time I actually bought a jar of jam. In fact, I'm going to stick my neck out here and say I don't plan on buying another jar of jam from the supermarket, ever. And I'll tell you why. Apart from the fact I don't use it a heck of a lot, but making your own is so easy, and you can make flavours that you just can't buy in the shop. Some of my personal favourites are the rhubarb and orange. Find a recipe for that. It's gorgeous. If enough people get in touch, I'll put it on the blog, but I need to know whether or not you actually want it. Or if you're happy to go and find it yourself, that's up to you. The other one is rhubarb and ginger. I'm not sure if you can get either of them in the shop. I don't remember seeing them here. So, making your own jam. Not always the quickest process, but you see when you see those jars lined up, it's a very satisfying process, I can tell you that. Do you make your own ice cream? Again, I haven't done much of it, but the strawberry batch we did, it was amazing. And the raspberry one, it was unlike anything I've ever been able to buy in the shops. So bear that in mind too when you come into the kitchen. You've got your huge bowl of fruit and your brain starts frying, trying to come up with ideas for it all. Ice cream. Most of us, I think, have got ice cream makers. I know you can do it without an ice cream maker. You just have to keep taking your tub out the freezer and giving it a real good mix every half hour or something to break up the ice crystals. Ice cream maker is easier. I'm on the second one. It sounds like I make a lot of ice cream. I haven't done it for a long time, but I would like to do maybe a mixed fruit one this year. I'd like that. Okay, next up on our glut menu, pickles and chutneys. I'm putting them both in together. The pickles are basically just raw vegetables preserved in spiced vinegar, so they're generally quicker to make, but they don't last as long as chutneys because they don't have all that added sugar. Still nice, still good, and still worth a go. I saw a recipe one time for pickled cucumber, which I haven't done yet. Do you find when you see things and you make a mental note of it and you've got all these ideas rattling around in the back of your head? These are ones I don't even write down. And you think, one day, I'll get to all of these and I'll get them all done. Pickled cucumber is one of those things. It's been rattling around my brain for ages. So this year I really want to make it and see what it's like. If nothing else, just to see what it's like. Now the chutneys, they are vegetables and maybe some fruits put in, cooked slowly with herbs, spices, sugar and vinegar. But the flavour develops over time, so they're usually left at least a month. Quite often they'll say 3 or 4 months after you make them to let all those flavours come through, and they can be stored for quite a long time. Now, I'm laughing because, again, I see these books and they say, stores for a year, keeps for a year, blah, blah, blah. I've got jams and chutneys in that cupboard. Actually, I'm scared and a little bit embarrassed to tell you how long they've been there, but I did see 2017 on one of the labels, and I opened it to see, was it any good? Had it gone off or whatever? It's fine. No mould, nothing. The lid still popped when I opened it. There had been no air in that, so I tried it. Absolutely fine. So I know they say 1 year. I've still got some from 2017 and I'm eating it. So make of that what you will. But the great thing about chutney is you can make them from just about anything you have a glut of, whether it's beetroot, apples, beans. One of my personal favourites is pumpkin. I made a pumpkin chutney and it was lovely. It was lovely. I couldn't get enough, so that is one of my favourites. I mean, there's loads of recipe ideas out there too, but the basic idea is just, chop up your produce into small cubes, put them in a pan with your spices, add your sugar, add your vinegar, simmer it until it's thick, and then decant it into sterilised jars. Nice and easy, and it is a great way to have your summer veg last you all through the winter months, or several years, if you're like me. You could also turn to smoothies as a way of using up some extra garden bounty. Spinach, strawberries, kale, raspberries and so on. Very healthy, quick and tasty. So if you find you have a load of fruit and some greens which you don't know what to do with, drink them. And speaking of drinking them, here is something I do with quite a bit of my extra homegrown produce. Probably shouldn't be admitting this to you, but I am. And it's wine. There's only so much rhubarb crumble anyone can eat, and sometimes I have raspberries appearing so quickly I'm stuck with bags of extra. Making your own wine isn't for everyone, I know, but if you are interested, it's a really economical way to get wines of all sorts of weird and wonderful flavours you can't buy, while at the same time not letting any of your fruits and veggies go to waste. So bear it in mind if you were thinking one day, one of those thoughts rattling around your brain, one day I'd like to try winemaking. Maybe this is your year. Maybe give it a go. Small batch. It's not a quick thing. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes months. But, it's a nice wee hobby to have in the background. And if none of that takes your fancy, you could just share it with others. Maybe you're sick of courgettes, but your neighbour loves them. Maybe you have a relative who's, addicted to homegrown carrots. I don't know. But they say sharing is caring, so that's always one way of dealing with gluts. Or you could use some of your produce to flavour oils. The main ones I'm thinking of here are all your herbs pretty much. Chilies, garlic and tomatoes in particular. I mean, these are not cheap things to buy, and they also make great gifts, so it's a win-win on that score. If you've got stuff growing in the summertime, whether it's birthdays, whether you're thinking, sun-dried tomatoes, so you've got them stored, make some flavoured oils for Christmas presents, that kind of thing, it's another idea. Now, the last idea I have for you for dealing with gluts is to ferment them, and I found a comment on a website called growveg.com, another really good website with advice on how to grow the fruit and veg and what to do with them. All sorts of different topics. Really, really good. I think that's the guy I watch on YouTube as well. So growveg.com, really good website. But I wanted to share this comment with you because when it comes to fermenting the veg, this says it far better than I could. And the comment was put in by William Collins on Friday, 21st of August, 2015. So I'm going to just quote what William says. I like to ferment many of our vegetables. I use a Fido jar, wide-mouthed, and a spring closure. Start with grated red cabbage, sprinkled with salt, and pound gently with a wooden dowel in the jar until a liquid forms. Add chopped beets, radishes, daikon, garlic, chilies, kohlrabi, whatever, sprinkling salt on each addition with continued pounding so that the liquid released by the vegetables covers the contents and removes air bubbles. I then take the cabbage core and a few large outer leaves as a plug at the top of the jar to hold the chopped veggies under the liquid with the pressure of the spring lid. The natural yeasts will do their magic and the escaping CO2 will vent without allowing air to enter. I store the jars in the basement to slow the fermentation process. The result is a tangy, crunchy treat to be enjoyed all winter. Now, I've just read that to you and I'm just wondering here, I know if you have something fermenting and obviously CO2 will be released, he's saying he puts the lid down and uses a spring catch, so you would have to release that, wouldn't you, daily to let the air out. We don't want exploding jars of fermenting vegetables. But it does sound like a great idea, and it really is something I want to get into this year. I haven't done fermenting veg in that way. Like fermenting, I'm trying kombucha. It's not my favourite. I don't do a second fermenting, to flavour it because I'm terrified of it exploding all over my kitchen. But I do things like kefir. I know some people call it kefir, whatever you call it. I do that. And sourdough. So I haven't got into fermenting veg, but he makes it sound so easy. So that is an idea I do want to try. It's quite a few of them actually that I want to get into, but yeah, I want to do that as well. And that, my glut-loving friends, brings us to the end of this week's episode. I really hope you got some ideas from that, for using your gluts. Maybe in a way you haven't before, or just to, like me thinking, oh, I've not done that for a while. I'll give that a go this year. I'll be coming back next week with more ideas to help us all get and keep gardening. But until then, you take care of yourself.